Pay attention. Before you scroll any further, before you open your messages, check social media, or rush into the demands of your day, pause for a moment. Because what you do right now can set the tone for everything that follows. There is something you need to do first. Something simple, yet deeply powerful. A prayer. But not just any prayer. Today, here on Torah Wealth Wisdom, we are focusing on Psalm 23, and we are going to declare it 7 times in a row. This is not random. The number 7 carries deep meaning throughout Scripture. It represents completion, fullness, and divine perfection. In the creation account, God formed the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested, declaring creation complete and whole. We see this pattern again and again. The walls of Jericho didn't fall on the first march. The Israelites circled them 7 times before the breakthrough came. Naaman was not healed on the first dip in the Jordan, but on the 7th. Even in the final moments of Jesus on the cross, there were 7 declarations before he gave up his spirit. So what does this mean for you, right here, right now? It means repetition is not empty. It is not just words being repeated for the sake of ritual. When it is done in faith, it becomes alignment. It becomes agreement with God's promises. It becomes a spiritual declaration that prepares your heart, your mind, and your life to receive what has already been written for you. As you recite Psalm 23 with intention, you are not just speaking words, you are releasing a covering over your life, over your home, over your finances, over your thoughts, over your emotions. Each repetition builds on the last, strengthening faith and weakening fear. And by the 7th declaration, something shifts inwardly. What once felt heavy begins to loosen. What felt blocked begins to open. Anxiety starts to lose its grip. Lack begins to feel temporary instead of permanent. And your awareness begins to shift toward provision, direction, and peace. So don't leave early. Stay present until the end. Because what we are about to do together is more than content. It is an act of spiritual alignment that can mark a turning point in how you see your life and how you move through it. If you feel led, take a moment and write in the comments, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." That simple act becomes a declaration of faith and agreement. And if you haven't already joined this prayer community, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Every message shared here is rooted in Scripture, built on faith, and intended to strengthen your walk and your focus. This is not just a channel, it is a space of reflection, prayer, and spiritual grounding. Now prepare yourself. We are about to begin the first of 7 declarations of Psalm 23. Read it slowly. Let it sink in. Don't rush it. Let each word settle where it needs to in your heart. Asterisk, asterisk, Psalm 23, asterisk, asterisk. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. He brings me into places of peace, where my soul can finally rest like grass beneath open skies. He guides me beside calm, quiet waters, where my spirit is refreshed and my mind is no longer overwhelmed. He revives what feels worn down inside of me and restores what life has tried to drain away. He directs me along the right paths, steady, grounded, and aligned with what is good, so that my life reflects purpose and carries meaning beyond what I can see in the moment. Even when I find myself walking through seasons that feel dark or uncertain, I refuse to be ruled by fear, because I am not walking alone. There is a presence with me that does not leave, does not abandon, and does not withdraw in difficulty. That presence comforts me, steadies me, and keeps me from falling apart when life becomes heavy. I am guided and protected. There is correction when I need it, and there is direction when I feel lost. Even in pressure, I am not without support. Even in opposition, I am not without provision. There is a prepared place for me, opportunity set before me, even in the presence of challenges that once intimidated me. I am honored, strengthened, and set apart with favor that cannot be explained by circumstances alone. My life is not empty or lacking. It overflows with what is needed, not just to survive, but to continue forward with strength and stability. What is good and faithful continues to follow me, shaping my steps day by day. And I know that I am not wandering without direction. I am being led toward a place of belonging, peace, and lasting connection with God, a life rooted in something eternal, not temporary. The Lord is my shepherd, and because of that, I will not live in lack or emptiness. I am guided into rest, into peace, and into restoration. I am led away from confusion and into clarity, away from fear and into trust. Even in the hardest moments of life, I do not walk alone, and I am not abandoned in the struggle. I am covered, directed, and sustained. There is comfort in the way I am being led, even when I do not fully understand the path. There is provision prepared ahead of me, even where resistance exists around me. I am strengthened in places where I was once uncertain. I am lifted in ways that are not always visible but are deeply real. What is good and merciful continues to stay with me, shaping my journey, protecting my steps, and carrying me forward into something stable and lasting, and I am not lost. I am being led toward a life of lasting peace, belonging, and divine connection that does not fade. Lord our God, in this moment I come before you with humility and sincerity, joining my heart with the one who is listening right now. I ask for your peace to settle over their mind, your guidance to direct their steps, and your presence to strengthen them where they feel weak. Let their spirit be steadied, their thoughts be calmed, and their path be made clear. Walk with them through every season, and remind them that they are never alone. This passage is essentially a structured spiritual prayer built around Psalm 23, but expanded into a longer, more emotionally charged declaration of faith, protection, and divine provision. To understand it clearly, it helps to break down what it is actually doing on 3 levels: its tone, its message, and its psychological and spiritual intent. At its surface level, the text is presenting a prayerful moment that is framed as something intentional and sacred, not casual or routine. It begins by setting the emotional environment. This is not just a normal gathering or random reflection, but something treated as spiritually significant. The language is designed to create focus, attention, and reverence. By stating that this is not ordinary, it immediately pulls the listener out of distraction and into a more receptive mindset. Then it establishes a shared belief between speaker and listener. It emphasizes unity in faith, suggesting that both are joined together in something deeper than words. This creates a sense of connection, almost like a collective spiritual experience rather than an individual message. The goal here is to make the listener feel included in a shared moment of prayer rather than a passive observer. From there, the focus shifts to describing God's presence. This section is filled with affirmations about divine qualities, wholeness, joy, provision, clarity, and protection. The central idea is that being in God's presence removes lack, confusion, and defeat. Everything that represents struggle, emptiness, uncertainty, failure is portrayed as powerless in comparison to divine authority. This is not just theological language, it is also emotional reassurance. It is meant to replace anxiety with stability by repeating ideas of safety and completeness. The text then emphasizes closeness. God is not described as distant or unreachable, but as near and actively involved, like a shepherd. This imagery is very important because it connects directly to Psalm 23, where God is portrayed as a shepherd guiding and caring for the sheep. The shepherd metaphor implies constant attention, protection from danger, and guidance toward provision. So the message here is, you are not abandoned and you are not navigating life alone. After establishing that foundation, the prayer shifts into application. It begins to speak directly over the life of the listener, asking for restoration, alignment, and breakthrough. This is where the language becomes more personal and declarative. Instead of general spiritual truths, it begins applying those truths to real-life struggles such as financial pressure, emotional exhaustion, and uncertainty about the future. A key idea repeated throughout is lack versus provision. The prayer consistently reinforces that lack is temporary and not the ultimate reality for someone under divine guidance. It suggests that anything missing in life, whether emotional peace, financial stability, or clarity, can be restored through alignment with God's will and timing. Another major theme is internal healing. The text repeatedly refers to emptiness, anxiety, and mental disturbance, These are not described as permanent states, but as conditions that can be loosened, renewed, or replaced with peace. The imagery of still waters and green pastures from Psalm 23 is used to symbolize emotional calmness and stability. Still waters represent a mind that is no longer agitated. Green pastures represent a life that has reached rest, nourishment, and safety. The prayer also focuses heavily on guidance and decision-making. It asks for clarity where confusion existed and direction where uncertainty once dominated. This reflects a common spiritual idea that God does not only provide resources but also wisdom in choosing the right path. So the transformation described here is not only external, financial, or situational, but also internal, mental clarity and emotional stability. As the passage continues, it becomes more assertive in tone. It begins to speak about breaking cycles, patterns of lack, struggle, or limitation that have repeated over time. These are described as forces being confronted and broken through divine authority. The purpose of this language is to create a sense of decisive change, as if the current moment represents a turning point where old patterns no longer have control. Closely tied to this is the idea of doors opening. Closed doors symbolize blocked opportunities or delayed progress. The prayer declares that what was previously blocked is now being released. This reinforces a shift from stagnation to movement, from delay to progress. The emphasis is not on human effort, but on divine intervention as the source of change. Another strong theme is honor and elevation. The passage mentions a table prepared in the presence of enemies, which comes directly from Psalm 23. This symbolizes being blessed or elevated, even in difficult or competitive environments. In practical terms, it represents recognition, opportunity, or success occurring despite opposition. The message is that external resistance does not cancel divine favor. As the prayer continues, it moves into what can be called life-covering declarations. It begins to bless different areas of life individually: mind, hands, home, rest, health, and decisions. Each category represents a different dimension of human experience. The mind is blessed with peace and clarity. The hands are blessed with productivity and success. The home is blessed with stability and provision. Rest is blessed with peace and protection. Health is blessed with emotional and physical restoration. This structure is important because it gives the prayer a holistic feel. It is not only about money or one specific problem, but about the entire life experience of the person. It suggests that divine care extends into every area, not just spiritual life in isolation. The passage also introduces a forward-looking expectation. It encourages the belief that change will become visible, signs of progress, open doors, and answered prayers. This creates anticipation and hope, reinforcing the idea that transformation is not only possible but already in motion. Finally, the prayer ends with a return to the core statement, "The Lord is your shepherd, you shall not want." This functions as both conclusion and foundation. It summarizes everything that came before. Guidance, provision, protection, and restoration all flow from that central relationship. In summary, the entire passage is not just a prayer. It is a layered spiritual affirmation designed to shift emotional state, reinforce faith, and create a sense of expectancy. It moves from establishing sacred atmosphere to describing divine qualities, to applying those qualities to personal struggles, and finally to declaring transformation across all areas of life. This passage is essentially a structured spiritual declaration and prayer built around themes of faith, provision, emotional healing, and life transformation. While it is written in a devotional tone, underneath the language it follows a very clear pattern. It speaks to struggle, replaces it with hope, and then reinforces that hope through repeated affirmations of divine support and change. To understand it properly, it helps to break it into layers: what it is saying literally, what it is trying to communicate emotionally, and what kind of mindset it is shaping in the listener. At its core, the passage begins with a strong declaration of closure, the end of every repeating cycle. This is important because it frames the entire message as a turning point. It assumes that the listener has been experiencing cycles of financial stress, frustration, or emotional exhaustion. Words like debt, disappointment, stagnation, and repeated losses are used to define a past season of life. The intention is to give those experiences a sense of finality, as if they are no longer the defining pattern moving forward. Immediately after closing the old cycle, the passage introduces a new chapter. This is a psychological and spiritual shift. Instead of focusing on what is being lost, it focuses on what is beginning. This new chapter is described through three main qualities: stability, clarity, and wisdom. Stability refers to emotional grounding. Clarity refers to mental understanding and direction, and wisdom refers to decision-making guided by spiritual awareness rather than fear. The text then transitions into a belief that personal work and effort will begin to have visible results. It speaks about hands being strengthened and favored, which is symbolic language for productivity and success. The idea is that what the person does will no longer feel wasted or unnoticed. Instead, their efforts will start producing tangible outcomes. Even past failures are reframed as temporary setbacks that can be reversed or transformed. A key idea, repeated throughout the passage, is the contrast between lack and provision. Lack represents emptiness, limitation, and scarcity. Provision represents abundance, support, and supply. The message insists that under divine guidance, symbolized by the phrase, "The Lord is my shepherd," lack is not the final reality. Instead, provision becomes the natural direction of life. This does not necessarily mean instant material wealth, but rather a shift in mindset from fear of not having enough to trust that needs will be met. Next, the passage introduces a very important emotional and spiritual theme: unseen struggle. It acknowledges people who feel unnoticed, overworked, or emotionally drained. It speaks to those who have put in effort without visible reward, or who have endured long waiting periods where nothing seems to change. This section is designed to validate feelings of discouragement, while simultaneously reframing them as temporary and meaningful rather than permanent and hopeless. The language about sowing with tears and waiting for harvest comes from a biblical agricultural metaphor. Planting seeds represents effort, and harvest represents results. The idea is that effort is never wasted, even if results are delayed. The prayer asks for acceleration of this harvest, meaning that delayed outcomes will begin to manifest. Another important theme is recognition. The passage emphasizes that even if human beings do not notice someone's efforts, God does. This is meant to provide emotional reassurance that unnoticed struggles still have value and will eventually lead to reward or restoration in some form. As the passage continues, it becomes more declarative and prophetic in tone. It speaks directly over the listener's life, saying that survival mode is ending. Survival mode here means living day-to-day under pressure, focusing only on getting through problems rather than building a stable future. The text declares that this is being replaced with a life of purpose, direction, and dignity. In other words, life is no longer just about enduring hardship, but about growing, progressing, and experiencing peace. Then the message introduces the idea of transformation in stages. What was stuck is being released, what was delayed is being realigned, and what was impossible is becoming possible. This creates a narrative of movement. Instead of life being static, it is portrayed as actively shifting toward improvement. After this, the passage moves into a series of blessings. These are structured affirmations directed at different parts of life: work, mind, heart, home, rest, and health. Each one represents a different dimension of human experience. For example, when it blesses the mind, it is focusing on mental health, reducing anxiety, increasing clarity, and reducing confusion. When it blesses the heart, it is referring to emotional resilience and faith. When it blesses the home, it is about stability, safety, and financial peace. When it blesses rest, it refers to sleep, peace of mind, and freedom from worry. When it blesses health, it includes both physical and emotional well-being. This structure is important because it creates a sense of wholeness. The message is not only about money or external success, but about the entire human experience being brought into balance. Another major idea is expectation of change. The passage encourages the belief that progress will not always be dramatic or immediate, but it will be real and noticeable. This is a key psychological shift. Instead of expecting sudden miracles, it encourages awareness of gradual improvement, open doors, clearer thinking, reduced stress, and better direction. The phrase "you shall not live in lack" reinforces the central identity of the message, dependence on divine guidance as a source of provision and stability. In summary, this entire passage is a layered spiritual affirmation designed to move a person from feelings of limitation and frustration into feelings of hope, stability, and expectation. It works by identifying struggle, reframing it as temporary, and then replacing it with repeated declarations of provision, guidance, and transformation. It blends biblical imagery, emotional reassurance, and motivational language to create a sense of turning point and renewal in the listener's life. In conclusion, this entire message is ultimately centered on a single consistent truth, the belief that life is not meant to remain stuck in cycles of struggle, but is capable of being redirected into a season of restoration, clarity, and steady provision under divine guidance. It begins in a place of disruption, where the listener is assumed to have experienced repetition of difficulty, whether that is financial pressure, emotional exhaustion, uncertainty about the future, or the feeling that effort has not been producing the expected results. From that foundation, the message intentionally creates a break in the narrative. It declares that the old cycle does not have authority over what comes next. In doing so, it encourages a mental and emotional shift. What has happened before does not have to define what happens going forward. As the message unfolds, it gradually replaces instability with structure. Confusion is replaced with clarity. Fear-driven decisions are replaced with wisdom and discernment. Emotional exhaustion is reframed into a process of strengthening and renewal. Instead of viewing life as random or continuously heavy, it presents it as something that can be guided, ordered, and stabilized when aligned with faith and trust. A major thread running through the entire speech is the idea of unseen effort eventually becoming visible fruit. It acknowledges that many people feel overlooked or delayed in their progress, as if their work, prayers, or sacrifices have gone unnoticed. But the message challenges that perspective by insisting that nothing done with sincerity is wasted. Even when results are not immediate, they are not absent. They are forming, developing, and preparing to manifest in due time. This creates a shift from discouragement to patience, and from frustration to expectation. Another key theme is the transformation of identity. The listener is not only being told that circumstances will change, but that their inner state is also meant to evolve. Anxiety is not meant to be permanent. Confusion is not meant to define decision-making. Lack is not meant to become identity. Instead, a new identity is formed around peace, direction, and trust in provision. The idea is that when inner stability is restored, external circumstances begin to reflect that change more clearly. The repeated blessings over different areas of life, mind, heart, home, work, rest, and health, emphasize wholeness. This is not a message focused on one isolated problem, but on the entire human experience. It suggests that true restoration is comprehensive. Mental peace influences decisions. Emotional stability influences relationships. Physical rest influences strength. And clarity of thought influences direction in life. Everything is interconnected, and healing in one area supports healing in others. The conclusion also reinforces a shift from survival mode into purposeful living. Survival mode is described as a state where a person is only focused on getting through each day, often under pressure, fear, or limitation. The message declares that this is not meant to be the final state. Instead, it points toward a life that is more stable, intentional, and guided by wisdom rather than constant reaction to problems. At its core, the speech also emphasizes timing and process. It does not promise instant change, but it encourages trust in gradual transformation. Some changes may be immediate, but others will be subtle, seen in better decisions, calmer thoughts, improved opportunities, and reduced internal pressure. The message teaches the listener to recognize these shifts as evidence that movement is happening, even if everything has not fully arrived yet. Finally, the closing return to the Lord's Prayer brings everything back to humility and dependence. After declarations of change, blessing, and transformation, the conclusion reminds the listener that true stability is not rooted in personal control, but in surrender, daily trust, forgiveness, and guidance. It balances confidence with humility and expectation with patience. Overall, the entire speech is a journey from limitation to renewal, from confusion to clarity, and from emotional heaviness to spiritual and mental steadiness. Its conclusion is not just about hope for external change, but about a deeper internal shift, where the listener begins to see themselves as guided, supported, and no longer defined by past cycles, but by the possibility of a more stable and purposeful future moving forward.